Mr. Toom is absent at the moment. Mr. Hauser? Here. Ms. Baker? Here. Ms. Simon? Here. We have a quorum.
Okay, is there any public comment relating to the agenda?
Yes, we have 2 speakers signed in.
Okay,
Mr. Joyce?
hello, please put your name in the record.
It's Terrence P. Joyce, business manager for Playhouse Local 310 and president.
Is your mic on?
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay. Terrence P. Joyce, business manager for Labor's Local 310 and president of the Cleveland Building Trades.
Okay,
I rise here today in support of the project at Playhouse Square. Early discussions with Art and his team, and Gilbane as well. You know, you can rest assured that the people in the community of Cuyahoga County will be working on this project. As a nice side note, I was recently put on the board of the ACE Mentoring Program, which is a national organization which encourages inner city kids to get into architect, construction, and engineering, hence the acronym ACE. And Tom Laird, actually, through Tom Laird, the principal at Gilbane's urging, recently put me on that board. So we're really excited. It just kind of further extends our reach, whether it be the role we're playing with CMSD at Max Hayes, or the role that we're playing at Tri-C through some adult education and reentry into the workforce programs. I think ACE is an extension of this. I believe, too, that it brings in kind of the whole team of construction. So not only are you just looking for a young man or young woman in this community to get into a trade, but you're also encouraging them to take architecture and engineering early on in school to where they're kind of ready and able to kind of further their education in college and do internships in the process. So that's just one piece of a big puzzle, but with the team both at Playhouse Square and the team of Gilbane, I think you're going to see, I know you're going to see a project that Cleveland and this community is proud of. Playhouse Square and Gilbane took a very early active role. We refer to them as tripartite meetings. So we're going to meet on site. We've already met there once, if not twice. Dave Wondolowski also serves with me on that board, to where we meet monthly and monitoring the ongoing efforts, whether it be inclusion, how the project's going, outreach that we might have to do. So, you know, that's what you're going to see right there, which I believe is a crowning jewel of Cleveland at Playhouse Square. And I think I know they've even extended that to their construction cycle of this building. And we're coming out of the ground there now, and we're real proud of it. So thank you. Any questions? No?
This is just the public comment.
Oh, I
Public
apologize.
comment portion where we just welcome anybody who wants to take the microphone and give us their thoughts on something. So thank you, Terry.
Councilman, and to the whole committee, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else?
Last speaker we have is Mr. Villa.
Camilo Villa with SEIU Local 1. Good afternoon, members of council. We're addressing the council today on behalf of our membership with SEIU Local 1. We're a union that represents 50,000 service workers across the Midwest, including about 1,500 janitors and other building service workers here in Northeast Ohio, primarily in Cuyahoga County. We represent the janitors who clean Playhouse Square's property here in downtown Cleveland. We appreciate the important role that Playhouse Square has had in the revitalization of downtown Cleveland. Their work has greatly expanded the community's access to diverse arts and entertainment programs, has driven the restoration of an entire district in our city's core, and has created economic opportunity for area residents, including union jobs that guarantee decent wages and benefits to the men and women that provide essential services in their properties. Playhouse Square has a proven track record of working productively with stakeholders in the community to ensure that their projects genuinely benefit the public. This is critical since Playhouse Square projects are often subsidized by taxpayer dollars. The proposed Lumen development depends heavily on public financing and bond financing. A $10 million loan from the Cuyahoga County General Fund would be a particularly sizable public investment, carrying a special responsibility to ensure good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. To support its request for this considerable investment, the Playhouse Square Foundation has stated that the project would drive economic vitality for the district, the city, and the Northeast Ohio region. This suggests that the unusually large loan, if approved, would have a community impact that extends far beyond the proposed development itself. The immediate economic challenges of our community faces are numerous, but chief among them are the poverty and economic inequality that plague our neighborhoods. Despite the downtown renaissance that Playhouse Square is helping to lead, too few jobs in Northeast Ohio pay workers a living wage, and too few families are able to meet basic needs in housing, childcare, food, clothing, household items, transportation, healthcare, and taxes. This lack of quality full-time jobs is associated with increased family instability, crime, and poor physical and mental health, all of which harm our community as a whole. The persistent symptoms of sub-poverty jobs in direct opposition to the economic vitality that both the Playhouse Square Foundation and Cuyahoga County are committed to fostering. It is our understanding that 10 permanent jobs will be created upon the project's completion, with an annual payroll estimated at $250,000. However, this would amount to annual earnings of $25,000 per worker, or about $12 an hour, assuming a 40-hour work week. This would put a family of 4 below the federal poverty threshold, $25,100 for 2018. In fact, to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, a Cleveland worker would have to earn $15.02 per hour. As a representative of the region's working families whose tax dollars would facilitate this financing, we believe it is imperative that the community impact for this project be clearly stipulated to include specific economic requirements that benefit the overall community, and that these requirements be enforced as a condition of the loan's approval. We have copies of our complete public statement, should members of council want them, along with some specific suggestions that members of council could utilize as options should they choose to attach stipulations to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can just if you want to give those to the clerk, that'd be fine. Thank you. Is there any other public comments?
No, no one is signed in.
Okay. There's minutes from the August 6th meeting that's been disseminated. Has everybody had a chance to look at them? Okay. There's been moved. The chair will second. There's been, I assume, maybe one abstention that might take place. Any discussions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. One abstention. The minutes are approved. There's one item that's on the agenda for today's meeting. If you could please read that in the record.
Resolution number 2018-0185, authorizing a development loan in the amount not to exceed $10 million to Playhouse Square Foundation for the benefit of the Lumen at Playhouse Square project to be located at 1600 Euclid Avenue in the city of Cleveland.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this? From, I assume, the administration first?
Good afternoon, members of the Economic Development Committee. Ted Carter, Chief Economic Development and Business Officer for Cuyahoga County. I'm going to give some very brief remarks, and we're going to tag team this. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Huth to walk through the mechanics and our underwriting approach to this project, and then have the President and CEO of the Playhouse Square Foundation come up and give his perspective as well, and potentially Michael Deemer from the Downtown Cleveland Alliance. So you'll hear some consistent themes through our presentation, but let me just start with kind of an overview of the project from our standpoint. On behalf of County Executive Armin Budish, we're pleased to present this request for a $10 million short-term loan to the Economic Development Committee for approval. This loan has been reviewed and recommended for approval by myself, the CCIC Loan Committee, our financial advisor, Stifel, and the executive as structured. We are recommending this loan for several reasons. One, it complements previous county placemaking investments in downtown Cleveland, which has supported additional new residential construction and has helped to alleviate the current tight supply of residential units. This project will do the same. So some of those other projects include the Beacon, CAC, Cleveland Athletic Club, and Church and State. Two, it supports a regional, national community investment, crown jewel, but it's certainly an anchor cultural institution. Three, and most importantly, supports an estimated 2,000 construction jobs. I hope that Mr. Falco will talk to the number of jobs, since the site's already under construction, that have been hired to date for the construction component. We also had our research entity from Cleveland State University do a high-level impact statement on the construction phase of this, not the long-term economic benefits. And so for the construction phase of this project, they anticipate, through their analysis, resulting from the investment of $135 million into a new multifamily residential structure, will generate approximately 1,500 jobs. So their Playhouse Square's projection is slightly higher than that, but this is consistent and independent assessment, paying $81 million in wages with a total economic impact of $226 million, and that's during the construction phase, not the permanent long-term life of the project. Lastly, this represents a unique opportunity to provide a short-term loan that is fully secured by Playhouse Square's foundation assets. We are in a first lien position, and that lien is supported by the unrestricted endowment funds. This loan will also provide a higher rate of return to the county in alternative investment vehicles. I'd like to ask Deputy Chief Huth to come up and kind of walk you through the mechanics of the underwriting process and some more details on the project.
Mr. Carter, do you want us to ask questions to you directly, or Mr. Huth, or would you have a common theme between the two of you, and we should be?
I guess when we're done,
Okay,
permission.
we'll take you and Mr. Huth first, and then ask questions about the loan structure, and then we'll pick up with Mr. Falco after
Okay,
that.
and then I can run upstairs and handle that other issue real quick.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some kind of high-level summary of the project overall. We're talking about a 34-story residential tower. It's going to have about 318 units in it. On average, they're going to be renting for about $235 a square foot. So it's probably anywhere from $2,000 to $3,800 a month, depending on the size of the unit. Going to have 530 parking spaces in it, which is more than the units you have. So you're obviously still going to be able to serve the parking needs of the businesses and the district on days when there are theater productions and so forth. And then there's going to be some street level retail that would really be focused on the residents who live there. There really is still a demand for market rate housing downtown. Typical cities like ours, usually about 5% of the people who work downtown also live downtown. But right now in Cleveland, it's around 2%. So there's still a demand for the folks who are working in the city for housing in the city. We think that's a really important reason, part of the reason we're supporting this. And then, as Ted mentioned, the 2,000 construction jobs. And the model that he mentioned that Cleveland State ran for us took the payroll of construction workers, the value that they add while they're here, and then the jobs that they support. So there's supply chain jobs, and then there's induced jobs that they bring through their spending. And that's how that model got to $226 million. And we think that, again, is a really important piece of why we as a development department are here, is to churn that money through the economy. The project is subject to the city's resident MBE, FBE hiring, and it sounds like it's going to be meeting, if not exceeding, all of those. And it's just, Mr. Joyce mentioned, there's mentoring and intern programs part of this too. Now I'll talk a little bit about our financing proposal. We wanted to structure this, that phrase win-win to me is a little overused, but that's what really is happening here. They're right now looking at about a 5.25% variable rate on their construction loan. So we wanted to tailor ourselves into that to keep the term short, to lower our risk, but also benefit them by bringing in our rate at about 3.5%. That saves them about $350,000 a year during the term of this loan, while making us $350,000 a year. Right now, treasuries for a 5-year treasury would probably get you a little bit under 3%. So we're going to be ahead on this because of the interest rate that we're earning here, making us money and saving them money. And then, as Ted mentioned, it's secured by what we initially called it a lien on their foundation, on their endowment. But after discussions over the last few weeks, we're actually able to simplify this so that basically what they're going to do is they're going to take $10 million of their foundation money and put it into an escrow account. So if there's a payment default, that doesn't get cured, we have the ability to turn right to that. It's virtually cash collateral. Now, you're probably going to say, why aren't they just using the $10 million for this? Well, the foundation really wants to focus that $10 million on maintaining and sustaining the theaters. So while they know that that's their focus, they're still willing to give us a pledge of this money or secure this loan this way, which to me is a huge indication of what the faith that they have in this project. They don't touch their endowment historically. So we've got the ability, if we have to turn to this in a way that they've never done anything like this before. Again, we think that's pretty important. And then, of course, we all know that the city is also in the project, right? They've given $1 million grant to the deal, and they've TIFed the project for a total of about, between the CRA that you get on the apartments and the commercial TIF, it's going to run out for about 30 years. So what the city is doing is putting tax incentives into the project that on a present value basis go to about $4 million. Not at all the same as because they're giving up money, right? In this case, we're making a loan. We're going to get our $10 million plus the $350,000 a year back every year. That's going to make us, depending on whether the loan ends up being for 4 to 5 years, anyone from $1.4 million to $1.75 million over the life of the loan. So that's really kind of the summary of the whole thing. We think it's a really solid project. It's doing a lot for the neighborhood downtown. I think we've got an incredibly strong loan, incredibly strong security with a great return on a bunch of different levels for the county.
Members of the committee? Yes, Ms. Stein?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The most obvious question I think we're all wondering about is why general fund dollars and not our economic development loan fund?
Well, certainly, and Councilman, and the real simple answer is that we just don't have $10 million in our economic development funds right now in terms of cash that we could commit. So we work with the finance department and our investment office to make use of reserve dollars to fund this so that we could make, as I said, make this return for the county.
How much money is in that fund that's not accounted for or encumbered?
That's not accounted for?
Yeah.
About $5 million right now, is that about right, Anthony? Yeah, about $5 million.
So this loan that would be going to the Playhouse Square Foundation or Playhouse Square, does it have to all be loaned at once, or could that be in increments? Has there been a discussion about when the cash would be advanced or how that would happen?
We're planning on putting it all out at once because it is part of the construction package. So that way we don't have to worry about, frankly, monitoring it that way. We'll be monitoring the repayments, but not the outgo.
Has there been any other requests similar to this to go into our general fund for loans to projects?
No, Councilman, not that I'm aware of, no.
And what was the thinking behind this as being an exceptional deviation from past practice? Why would we, obviously we're going to get some return on investment. I think it sounds secure. Once we open this door, is this two things? I mean, this is an exceptional
Yes,
act.
it is. Yes, it is.
First of all, so how do we justify that? And two, what about going forward in future projects? Would this be one and only? Would this be consideration? This sets precedent. So those are kind of my two questions.
Okay. Yes, it is exceptional, but we think this is an exceptional project, not only because of the impact it's going to have on the neighborhood and downtown, but also the impact it's going to have on the county's bottom line. It's an extra $350,000 a year. Now, there's a question about do we ever do this again, okay? There's kind of two ways I look at this, and I don't want you to take my first response as being flippant, but it's this body that has to look at that, right? So if we come back to you again with a project like this, you have to say whether you think it's okay, all right? That's one of the kind of the easier answers. But the other answer to me is that probably not, because when you look at how we've structured this deal in terms of the return to the developer, this is a nonprofit developer, and this $350 a year that we're saving them makes a difference to a nonprofit developer. It probably wouldn't be enough to make a difference to a for-profit developer. But at the same time, I can't think of a nonprofit developer that could give us this kind of collateral. So I think this, I hate to use this phrase perfect storm in this context, but to me it kind of is that. I can't see this kind of set of facts lining up again anytime in the future. I don't want to insult any of the other foundations and nonprofits out there, but I just don't see that happening. So.
As I stated, I'm satisfied with the security on this just off the bat, but okay, thank you.
Questions from anybody else? Who's first?
I go. Yeah, I don't have a problem with this loan. I'm good with the cash collateral. I like the mentoring program. It's another downtown loan. But I know me and Director Carter has had a conversation. Have we looked at maybe doing some type of percentage for low income housing for this project?
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, from the very early stages, there were some discussions like that, but with how expensive out-of-the-ground construction is here in Cleveland, it just doesn't make sense. The subsidy would be bigger than it is in order to make that work.
Okay.
Mr. Falco can elaborate a little bit more on that, too.
I just always feel we're going to use taxpayers' dollars. We should at least try to make some percentage of it accessible for everyone in Cuyahoga County. But I do understand you guys' point of view as well, and the cash collateral, we're getting a return on interest. I feel comfortable with this loan.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker, do you have questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple. It does look like a very good project. The endowment piece that you mentioned with Playhouse Square, that is something that they will not touch until the complete loan is paid at the end of 4 or 5 years?
Mr. Chairman, the councilman, that's correct. That they've got about 17 million, I think, in their unrestricted, and they've agreed that they won't let that drop below 10, and then we'll have a first position on that 10. And it's important to understand that that's the unrestricted piece of their endowment.
Right.
Some of their endowment's restricted, but this, if the board, push come to shove, the board would be able to use this for us.
And if I also read that the interest will be paid each month, or did I not read that?
It's probably going to be semi-annual, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. But it's going to be 3.5 a year, so it's going to be interest only
Interest only is what I meant to say.
for the term.
So perhaps we can expect twice a year annually. Okay. It will not wait to the 4th or 5th year.
Oh, no, it'll be annually, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask this about the affordability, as we were mentioning it earlier. To support a $2,000 to $3,800 a month, incomes would have to be, if you take 25 to 30% of that,
Yeah, I'd have to do the math. I haven't
25, yeah, 50,000 a year,
Yes.
100, maybe 100, 120,000 a
Probably closer to
year.
100, I would say closer to 100, yeah, but that's a guess, I just,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're looking to build 318 residential apartments for those that make probably 100,000 or more a year.
And up, yes.
And if I can ask also, the parking, a 530 car parking garage, we have 318 residents. Typically, they have 2 cars.
Actually, Councilwoman, that's not the trend.
Okay,
In fact, it's very likely that we'll see fewer cars per unit in the future.
so you believe, of course, that 318
Oh, yes,
or 530 cars parking is more than adequate for
right.
over 300?
Particularly when you realize that they're targeting the downtown worker who could then walk to work from this location. And you're just down the street from a grocery store, and the retail on the first floor that'll service the residents.
And your research shows that people will opt to stay downtown rather than have a place outside of downtown and travel. That's how you think you're gonna be selling these at 100,000 or more a year. in income.
Councilman, I think the research shows that approximately 5% of the folks who work downtown will also live downtown. But right now, we've only got about 2%.
All right,
in
I think I
downtown
did hear
Cleveland.
you say that.
So there's room for growth there.
Good. Okay, that's it for now,
Okay, thank you. Ms. Truth,
President.
I'm sorry, we're back over here.
Super quick question. Did you mention storefronts in this project?
Councilman, yes, there'll be some retail on the first floor.
Just what kind of retail? Just
It's-
do we have anybody who's planning to move in there yet? Not yet.
No, nothing specific yet. no.
Okay.
Ms. Simon?
So one of the questions that keeps coming up when we actually consider these kinds of loans is the gentrification issue, the issues that SEIU brought up. And I think this council has established other funds to enable us, kind of in response, to address different types of housing projects that perhaps we need to embolden or market them differently, but that's a different market, and if we can establish, I think we already are looking at a housing fund to stabilize housing and these types of issues, so I understand the concern about these high-end rentals downtown because it's they're not affordable to everybody. But on the other hand, I just want to say that council has and is considering other funds to address these other issues which come along with these discussions. Inevitably, if Cleveland grows, we have a slight gentrification potential, certainly not like California or Seattle or Portland, but we have to just be aware of it. So I just want us, when we consider this, to be open to any kind of housing loans and be able to address those needs when we have developers come in who actually want to invest in different types of housing. Do you have a comment on that?
I think, Councilman, that's an excellent point, and when you get the right project, it's something we would really want to do, yes.
Other questions? The chair has a few for you also, or you or Mr. Carter, whichever more appropriate. I know you indicated that was an endowment fund that stands behind this, and you talked about the perfect storm for us. It seems like it's also a perfect storm for them. I don't know that their endowment fund has ever been used to this same extent. We'll ask Mr. Falco.
Correct.
So that this just as equally on our side is unique, it's unique for them to making this kind of commitment to be fully supported for our full $10 million. So I don't want that to be left. I don't want the media to miss that significance also, because my assumption is that those who funded that endowment were not necessarily thinking in terms of this use of that endowment. So we'll ask Mr. Falco when he gets up here, but I don't know if you, are you aware of any time that that's been done in the past?
Our understanding is it's never been touched.
Okay, so that will be something that's just as unique. Do we have the Treasurer's Office, their opinion on the fund investment versus what we would recover on because I think you're actually high, seeing on the Investment Advisory Committee on what we actually make on our money. I don't think we're making 3% on our money out there.
Mr. Chairman, that's what the 10-year Treasury was, or sorry, the 5-year Treasury was coming in at. Yeah. I think the number you may be seeing is the Star Ohio overnight rate, which is like 1.25, or no, that's not right.
Yeah. I would like to get the Treasurer's Office.
So.
I'd like to get the Treasurer's Office in here at some point to tell us, because I think that the differential will actually be significantly higher as far as our invested money.
Actually, I talked about that with him this morning, just so I'd be ready for you. Now I can't find it in my notes, but
yeah.
The Star Ohio, I think the overnight at Star Ohio I've got here is 2.1.
Yeah, so we're looking at quite a differential in that respect, and actually the long-term money is pretty flat right now too, as far as what we can get on the investment side. So I think we're probably making more money than that. I know that one of the things that this body had done was to create the ability to borrow money for our schools and communities and things of that nature. This would have been, hopefully would have been a nice vehicle, but my understanding is that the Ohio legislature did not allow us to be able to use it for that purpose.
Right.
So we stand ready to invest up to $150 million into community activities. Unfortunately, this was not, being the nonprofit, we couldn't use it that way. But and I know the legislature has allowed us to go to 10 years. So I would not be surprised if we don't see other vehicles like this for communities and schools in the future, because that's one of the things we authorized probably 5-6 years ago, but it was only for 5 years. Now the new legislative allowance is for 10, so I would not be surprised if you won't be bringing that back in some way, shape, or form from some point along the way. You have any idea what the occupancy is going to be on day one, as far as pre-committed?
As of day one, no, but they have reservations for about half the units right now.
That's right. I guess that's what I was reaching for. Now, you said that there's only going to be 10 employees that are going to be part of this project. And again, maybe these are better questions for Mr. Falco, but that seems awful low, because that's the folks who are doing the parking garage, the people who are cleaning the building, the people who are maintaining it, the retail employees that are going to be on the ground floor. It just 10 seems like it's would be a low number for a 34-story building. I would just think that the elevator, maintenance and service personnel and all the other things, but I don't know, where did you come up with the number 10?
That would be the direct employees of the owners of the building. So a lot of the other things that you mentioned are either going to be contractors or, you know, the retail, for example, won't be employees of the foundation.
That's correct, but they will be employees that will be directly employed, but for this building having a retail on that first floor, you wouldn't employ any people there.
But we're keeping our numbers conservative, sir.
Yeah, well, I just want to, I would like for us to get the numbers out there as far as its full impact, to run a 530 parking spot, that too, I would think would take, I mean, just looking at how many employees are at this parking across the way, that takes a lot more of people to service it, to keep it clean, get the snow out of there. I mean, I know you're being conservative, but I think we also want to make sure that we're telling the public that these are jobs that are going to ripple through directly as a result of this activity. We had somebody from the SEIU only speaking to the manager, or the service personnel in there, but I would think there's got to be other folks that are going to be working in this space.
We'll dig into that.
Okay, I'd like to get all that information so that we can, because let's face it, the 11 of us are going to be asked to vote on this at some point along the way, and I'd like to have 100% of all the facts as far as what's going to be out there, so they can know, so they can defend their position. Any questions based on mine? Yes.
Just before we go on, obviously, we're going to hear the impact, I think, from Mr. Falco, but in terms of, and this might be a different person up here, but this is our reserve fund that I thought we have legislation protecting those reserve dollars and keep those on hand with a certain percentage in the general fund. And if we go ahead and spend this much money out of our reserve, how are we impacted with regard to the legislation that council put in place years ago?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we've had that discussion with fiscal, and they have ways of moving money around to make sure that they can stay compliant with that legislation. But we did have that discussion.
My assumption is that we're not spending any money in regards to this. We're loaning money that will have a security interest, which will be guaranteed against a $10 million line. It would be almost like if, we're in pretty rock solid position, I think, unlike, we didn't spend it on a project, from that standpoint.
So we're just banking it in alternative ways.
Yeah, we're banking, it's exactly what we're doing, and we're making more money on it, yeah. But it's a great question. Any other out there? Yes.
Just a little more talk on that. So the 10 million that we would be taking out of the reserves, sounds like, is not going to be replaced throughout the general fund. I mean, that's not what I heard. I heard this is going to be banked as a money's still there because it's secured kind of mentality. How exactly, are you going to structure that 10 million?
No, well, from our perspective, that 10 million will come out of
General fund.
a combination, general fund reserves, whether it's general reserves or reserves that are in the economic development fund right now. But we've been working with fiscal so that they can be sure, from a balancing perspective, to keep the reserves at the limits that were mentioned in the ordinance, Councilwoman.
And how would that happen? How would you be able to keep those reserves with $10 million less that's put aside for a repayment of a loan?
I'm going to probably have to get somebody from finance to explain that to you, because they assured me that they would not have, this wouldn't be a problem, so.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but if you can think of it in terms of that we have taken the $10 million out, replaced it with a note that says it's guaranteed at $10 million. So on the balance sheet, that is a secured note that it will have a $10 million sitting right behind it from their endowment fund. So the only difference is we're actually going to be making more money on that than what we are currently making on it. But we can get somebody in here.
Okay.
If there's, yes, Ms. Simon?
Just for when we do get somebody in here from fiscal, the return on the investment, I want to know where that's going to go. If it's just going to go back into the general fund?
Yes.
Yes?
General fund.
General fund?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be a clever way of getting money into the Economic Development Fund.
Yeah, we
though.
tried that.
And my antenna's up, okay.
No, we tried that.
Well, I mean, theoretically, not even theoretically, the money is being invested out of the general fund. It's getting converted into a tool, then should go back
Right.
in the general fund, to which we decide what we're going to do with it. Perhaps the Economic Development Fund. But anyway, well, any other questions for Mr. Huth or Mr. Carter? Hearing none, Mr. Falco, prepared to talk. Oh, yes, Mr. Carter?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to a couple of the commentaries that, thanks, Mr. Huth, that Ms. Simon, Mr. Hauser made. To your question of why this, I wanted to add some perspective in addition to what Mr. Huth said. When he said the perfect storm, this is really a unique project. So the fact that it's a short-term loan, which Mr. Huth talked about, most entities want triple the term that they're prepared to meet at the dollar amount. So that's pretty significant. We rarely see that. Usually, as you know, we're a minimum of 10 years and longer, and most developers want that type of amortization, so that's unique. The fact that they're pledging their endowment against it. There's some also, I don't want to get into, Mr. Huth can kind of talk about how they've blocked out monies to ensure repayment that are part of this structure. So this is pretty unique, but if circumstances like this evolved in another project, we consider it. I can tell you that this wasn't an immediate yes. We've been in conversations with Mr. Falcon and his team for about 8 months, trying to, and so this, a lot of credit for this structure goes to Mr. Huth in terms of how this was put together, and so we're very comfortable with it. But for the collateral and security, the fact that they haven't used their endowment and that they're prepared to use their endowment if necessary, and that's something that we don't, I think that they can also, Mr. Falcon can also speak to their operating income and how they're going to service this debt. So all in all, we think that it's a prudent. But to Mr. Hauser's question, which is correlated to this, that I'm committed to working with you and this council and Mr. Surratt to figure out a way that we can ensure affordability in downtown. So unfortunately, this project, we did have a discussion with the developer, and the time that we kind of were made aware of it and asked to potentially support it didn't allow for those type of discussions, but it's something that's top of mind, and I can tell you that there are other developers that are thinking about downtown and the affordability issue. I would call it workforce housing for sure would be, so we're working with the Downtown Cleveland Alliance to figure out how we introduce that component in any other downtown project that we may consider supporting. I guess Mr. Falco, he should
Sure, that'd be great.
come up
Hear
and
about
hear
the
from
actual
him. Yeah.
nuts and bolts of what takes on behind the scene.
Mr. Chairman and council members, thanks for the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about the project.
I know we know who you are, but
Art Falco, I'm sorry,
Sorry,
President and
just have to be on the
CEO of
record.
Playhouse Square.
sorry about that.
No, my fault. So this project, let me give you a little bit of background. Playhouse Square has, as one of their strategic initiatives, wanting to see more residential living in the district. It really focuses on not just what you see when you come to the theaters or our educational programs or people that are working in the district, but also more people where we want them to live in the districts, that live, play, work concept. So Playhouse Square is always the developer of last resort. We had absolutely no interest in being the owner developer of this project, but we had two potential developers, very, very good, high-quality developers locally, at the end of the day, just could not make the numbers work in terms of the type of return they needed in order to move forward with this project. This project is a very tight project from a financial standpoint. What is interesting in terms of new construction and what people don't realize is it costs as much to build in Cleveland as it does in Chicago. But if you're building a residential project or even an office building, the rents are substantially lower here in Cleveland than in Chicago, which makes the return on investment much lower. The reason that Playhouse Square, and we've been at this for about 17 years. Our original intent was that we could build the parking structure and that we would have a developer then that would develop the residential portion. Fortunately, we are in a capital campaign for the future of Playhouse Square. We've actually raised over $97 million out of $100 million to be used for a number of initiatives. And some of those initiatives are renovation of some of the older theaters that are now 30 to 35 years since initial renovation. Dollars available for educational programs, ticket subsidies, transportation subsidies, and sensory-friendly programming, and so having a fund in place that allows us to do that. Third is what we call a theater preservation fund, and this is mainly through planned gifts. We really need our endowment. As you mentioned, our unrestricted endowment is 17 million. We have a restricted endowment of another 9 million, so 26 million. We really should be, for an organization our size, with the number of assets we have, $50 to $60 million. That would generate $2 to $2.5 million every year so that we could spend on capital expenditures to make sure the theaters are as beautiful 30 years from today as they are today. So as part of all of that, we had a very generous foundation that was affiliated with Playhouse Square that has committed $15 million. And that became the basis for our equity. This foundation was headed by an individual that unfortunately passed away 8-9 years ago. His goal was to see a market rate condominium on that site, and he was willing to move forward and fund it. Unfortunately, he got ill, he passed away, the recession came, whatever, and as I've mentioned, we've been working at this for 17 years. So the foundation trustees believe in the project as we do. So we have $15 million of equity, which is a lot of skin in the game, as well as the value of the land. And so when the other two developers decided that they could not generate a return, we stepped up and said, we're going to do it. And even though we believe we're going to generate a lower return than a for-profit developer could, we can afford that because we can take a 6 or 7 or maybe even an 8% return and use it as a working endowment than someone else who would need 10, 12, 14% return. So that's why we stepped up. Now, we don't have the expertise. We have expertise in many areas, but not building high rises. So we went out and we've encouraged a nationally renowned company called Heinz International that is a developer of office buildings, of residential projects all around the country. If you want to say they're the A-list, they are incredible. And we brought them in for a fee. They have the expertise to develop this. We also hired Gilbane as our construction manager, also nationally renowned, an architectural firm that partnered with a local firm. This firm is out of Chicago, also designs designs high-rise residential projects. So in terms of the expertise, we brought that whole team together to develop this project, to make sure that this project delivers not only in terms of the quality of the project, but also delivers on a financial basis, because we do expect to have a return, because we expect a return to come out of this that then will allow us to do all of the other aspects of our mission, which is education, which is developing, bringing more performances into Playhouse Square. This past year, we had 1,200 performances, a little over 1.2 million people coming to Playhouse Square. Our economic benefit to the community is, we need to do an updated economic impact study, but clearly our budget is $80 million. So clearly we're well over $100 million annually. And we have always stated that we use the performing arts as an economic development project. Yes, it's a great quality of life entity, but it's all about how do we get more people here? How do we get more people living here? How do we get more people working here? And so that's why we're here today. It's a $135 million project. It's the largest project by far that we have undertaken. But our board unanimously believes that it is going to be successful. And the support, this $10 million loan, does provide benefit for us. There's no question. And as Assistant Director Huth said, we believe it's a win-win, that the county can generate a higher return, we can lower our interest expense, and it's fully guaranteed.
Questions from the committee? Mr. Falco? None? Wow, okay, then I'm sorry, you get me then. The 10 employees, that just seems, if I'm looking at retail across the bottom, I'm thinking any store is going to have 3 to 5 people in their minimum. If I'm thinking in terms of a parking garage, you've got to have attendants coming for the time that the show is on. You're going to go all the way through the evening. You're going to have somebody that's got to keep the snow out of there. It just seems to me, and then you got maintenance and service personnel that are going to be in there. Where did the number 10 come from?
Well, you're absolutely correct. And I believe when this was initially put together, we also have hired the largest property management company in the country for residential living. And we asked them, how many employees do you have? And they said 10, normally for a project of our size. What they didn't take into account are all of those ancillary type jobs, which is the parking side, which is also, because originally we're not intending to have retail, unless the demand for retail made sense. It will probably be complementary retail. It may be something like a bike shop or a bike repair shop. It may be something like a pet spa, so that could cater to the residents and the neighborhood. We don't know yet. But you're right, and we can go back and we can talk to our parking operator and say, how many employees do you have? And also, same thing with retail, and do an estimate. Because you're right, it is substantially more than 10. And I'm not certain where the information came with the SEIU, whatever,
SEIU.
individual.
Yeah, yes.
But clearly it's going to be, I believe the number is quite a bit higher than the $242,000. I think that the average is probably going to be closer to $40,000 per employee.
What would it take for you to be able to get that research for us?
Very easy.
Okay,
We can get it in a few days.
Okay, if we can do that, that would be, obviously,